You are listening to the Lanterns Radio Network, where Americans come together to illuminate the truth. Turn it up loud and proud until the knob breaks off. Lanterns, illuminating the truth.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Holloway. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Radio Network. Today is February 16th, 2017, and we've got a lot to talk about today. Just going to give you a quick rundown. We're going to talk about the Donald Trump press conference that happened today, still trending at the top of Twitter, and it's been 2 hours since the press conference ended. We're going to talk about the Oroville Dam, and we're going to have a special guest on, Mr. Scott Cahill of Watershed Incorporated in Ohio. He's an expert on dam construction. We're also going to talk about PewDiePie and the scandal that he is embroiled in right now. A little bit more on that later. And we're also going to discuss the rise of 21st century nationalism. All that in the next hour here on the HoloNet, on Lanterns Radio Network. All right, everybody, welcome to the show. I'm Matt Holloway, your host here on the HoloNet, and you're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. Thank you very much for joining me on the show today. I wanted to start out with the Donald Trump press conference. President Donald Trump today held a press conference that was over an hour long. And I mean, this press conference is going to be making news for days. The reason that I know that is because I came home from work after listening to this thing on the way home, and I opened up the Blaze. 5 stories on the Blaze, just on President Donald Trump today. Talk about dominating the news cycle. Now, there's been a lot of controversy going on right now. We've had the resignation of General Mike Flynn, former Secretary Mike Flynn, following allegations that he colluded with the Russians prior to the actual inauguration of President Trump, despite the fact that Ronald Reagan successfully negotiated the release of the Iranian hostages before he was sworn in, so I don't really see what's going on here. And apparently the president and experts like Dr. Krauthammer on Fox also agree that we can't really find anything that Mike Flynn did wrong here. Now, my understanding is that General Flynn was less than completely clear and honest when it came to explaining the scenario to Vice President Mike Pence, and that was the reason that President Trump asked for his resignation, as explained by the president today during this press conference. But that's not what I want to focus on today. What I want to focus on is a sentence that blew my mind. And it's going to get to you too. And it's not something you would ever expect to hear from a Republican, ostensibly conservative president of the United States. And we're going to go to that clip right now from President Trump. Bear with me.
Among their responsibilities will be ending the bleeding of jobs from our country and negotiating fair trade deals for our citizens. Now look, fair trade, not free, fair.
Hang on. Hang on, did he just say fair trade, not free trade? Fair trade? Houston, I think we might have a problem here.
If a country is taking advantage of us, we're not going to let that happen anymore. Now, every country takes advantage of us, almost. I may be able to find a couple that don't. But for the most part, that would be a very tough job for me to do. Jobs have already started to surge. Since my election, Ford announced it will abandon its plans to build a new factory in Mexico and will instead invest $700 million in Michigan, creating many, many jobs. Fiat Chrysler announced it will invest $1 billion in Ohio and Michigan, creating 2,000 new American jobs. They were with me a week ago. You know, you were here. General Motors likewise committed to invest billions of dollars in its American manufacturing operation, keeping many jobs here that were going to leave. And if I didn't get elected, believe me, they would have left. And these jobs and these things that I'm announcing would never have come here. Intel just announced that it will move ahead with a new plant in Arizona that probably was never going to move ahead with.
Now, I'm going to stop the president right there. I live in Arizona, so this one hits a little bit close to home. And I just want to point out here that he might not be giving enough credit to Governor Doug Ducey, who's done a ton of work to bring in new businesses, to the Arizona State Legislature, who have taken extraordinary steps to make Arizona a more profitable and also a more attractive state for heavy industries like Intel. By the way, Intel was already here. Also, we had Motorola. So Arizona is already known for its tech manufacturing sector. We have Lockheed Martin, for God's sakes. Come on now. Really? And this just all brought me back. I mean, this was like Rocky Horror, let's do the time warp again, because I'm telling you, I did a full-blown throwback to President George W. Bush, and we'll go to that audio right now.
I believe the role of government is not to create wealth, but to create the conditions that allow entrepreneurs and innovators to thrive. I believe in the power of free enterprise, which made the decision I faced last fall one of the most difficult of my presidency. I went against my free market instincts and approved a temporary government intervention to unfreeze the credit markets so that we could avoid a major global depression. As the world
Now, as much as I hate to cut off President George W. Bush, I went against my free market principles. Sound familiar? Fair trade, not free trade. You look that up in the dictionary, at least in the glossary of political terms, that's called protectionism. If you check into it, there was actually a large tariff act. I believe it was the Taft-Hartley-Smoot Act, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, the labor... wait, no. Hang on. Yeah, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, or the Tariff Act of 1930, which was sponsored by Senator Reed Smoot and Representative Willis C. Hawley, raised U.S. tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods, and it was signed into law June 17th, 1930. Now, what about that date seems a little odd? What about that date reminds you of something? Oh, yeah, the Great Depression. The last time the American government went on a really bad protectionist bent, it led to economic stagnation and prolonged the Great Depression. It didn't solve for it. It prolonged it. The only solution to America's economic problems right now is laissez-faire, free market capitalism. And when we elected a business president, I thought he would understand that. And he has so far taken really great steps to roll back domestic regulation, saying that in order to put in one piece of regulation, you have to take back two. And he's also lessened EPA regulation. He's doing some great things to handle regulation. But when you start bandying about words like fair trade instead of free trade, that's why I always had an issue with NAFTA. The North American Free Trade Agreement did anything but make trade free. Free trade is regulated by the open market, by market pressure, by the invisible hand. Hearing a sitting conservative Republican president talk about fair trade gives me hives. And Milton Friedman is rolling over in his grave somewhere. God have mercy on his soul. But this is not what it sounds like when you're dealing with a president who understands the free market economy. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that President Donald Trump doesn't understand how to do business. But this is a man who's known how to work the machine in his whole career because of the type of business that he's in. He's in real estate. He's in project development. Wanting to build a hotel for you? He knows how to get around all the different government offices, all the different permits, all the different unions. Everybody you have to schmooze, glad hand, and get to in order to get your project moving. This is what he does. So someone who knows how to use the machine that well, are they really going to be completely ready to dismantle it? I'm not sure. But stay tuned. When you start hearing things like fair trade, fair tax, perk your ears up. It's a trap, folks. Call Admiral Akbar. That'd be the cat in Star Wars. Looks like a squid. Told Luke it's a trap. You always have to watch out. Because a government that's big enough to give you everything you want is also big enough to take everything you've got. Now we're going to go to a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the Oroville Dam. And we're going to talk to Scott Cahill. He's our expert on dam construction and on the types of failures that we're seeing right now in Northern California and what it could potentially lead to. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast on the Lanterns Radio Network. I'm Matt Holloway. We'll see you on the other side. Matt Holloway here. I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about an amazing group of patriot entrepreneurs. Hot Pants LLC of Arizona is a welding, fabrication, and metallurgy company specializing in display weaponry and shields. A veteran-owned and operated company, they create interesting items inspired by their customers' ideas as well as beautiful custom pieces of their own design. They are certified welders, credentialed by the Arizona Automotive Institute and Tidewater Community College with a background experience from the U.S. military and the shipping industry. Hot Pants specializes in creating weaponry for cosplay, anime, video games, and the zombie apocalypse. No matter what your imagination can dream up, they can create a slew of interesting, creative weapons and shields ideal for any costume or outfit. If you're engrossed in the world of video games or role-playing, let them arm your character with unique, high-quality weapons. You won't be disappointed by their artistry and attention to detail. Give them a call today at 602-900-6856. That's 602-900-6856. Order online at www.hotpantsmetal.com. That's HOTTPANTS metal.com. Also there on Facebook at facebook.com/hotpantsllc.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
All right, folks, joining me on the show now is Mr. Scott Cahill. Scott Cahill is the owner of Watershed Services of Ohio and has been featured on local CBS News there in Richmond, Virginia on a number of occasions as an expert on dam construction. He's written a couple of pieces here. One, our Oroville Dam, Our Father's Legacy, and the other is Oroville Dam, A Failure to Communicate, that have been getting an awful lot of attention in the LinkedIn community. I found it to be a wonderful piece, and I'll provide it in the links to the show notes. But I wanted to go ahead and welcome Scott Cahill to the show. Scott?
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Now, a lot of my audience may not be incredibly well versed on engineering of megastructures such as dams, and also with hydrodynamics that are associated with handling a load like you see at the Oroville Dam. So could you summarize for us the situation as you see it presently?
Certainly. Well, Matthew, the Oroville Dam has three methods to discharge water from the reservoir downstream. Of course, as the rainfall events take place, then that water needs to be moved through the structure of the dam and safely downstream into the Feather River. Those methodologies are through the penstocks and the generating equipment in the central section of the earthen embankment dam itself, and then on the right groin, that would be looking downstream, the abutting indigenous soils, the rock that was there before the dam was built. They have an emergency spillway, and then stepping toward the dam, they have a primary spillway. Those are the only three methods that water can get from the streams, the reaches upstream, through the reservoir, and downstream.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Sure.
Now, I had seen online, and I've done a little bit of research and digging in preparation for today, that there was a case that was brought to the FERC some time ago by an activist group pertaining to the auxiliary spillway, giving the recommendation that it be covered with a concrete apron in order to prevent the kind of cutback erosion that we're seeing right now in the wake of that spillway being actuated. Now, I've read both of your pieces, and I've read several more online, and the opinion that you seem to express is that for about $500,000, what now is amounting to over $200 million in probable repair work could have been prevented. So what do you think is the primary cause here behind that step not being taken, what would seem like a common sense step?
Yeah, in 2005, the Sierra Club, the Friends of the River, and the South Yuba Citizens League filed a motion with Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, asking them to armor the emergency spillway. FERC reviewed the documents that were forwarded to them by the operators, which is the state of California and a number of water systems, and the determination was made that because of the cost of doing the armoring and the difficulties of the construction, it would not be done. Of course, looking back at the situation that we find ourselves in today, that seems like I'm certain that everyone involved wishes very, very deeply that had happened now. And that would have forestalled the problems that we found. What happened, to give a little bit of background here, if I may, Matthew, is that they were operating the dam as they normally would. The water levels rose. They actuated the primary spillway, which is the primary methodology for moving the water from the basin downstream. In fact, since this dam was constructed in 1968, they have never actuated the emergency spillway. They were operating the primary spillway, and they had a problem. They had a problem previously, in fact. In 2013, had a problem with the spillway where a piece of it eroded, and that was replaced. Some work was done on it, and in fact, it failed at exactly the place where the work had taken place in 2013, or very close there too. Recognizing that the primary spillway was in jeopardy, they closed the gates, which are the valves that allow water to run downstream through the primary spillway, allowing the water level of the dam to rise, and then to vent over the weir, which is the wall that governs the elevation of the water over the emergency spillway. The water began to spill over that weir, and quickly, in a matter of a couple of hours, started an erosion of the rock, the weathered rock on the other side of it. So moved trees and debris and dirt downstream and began to scour the rock until the operators of the dam decided that it was prudent to ask for an evacuation of the people below the dam. So it's a most serious situation. After they recognized that the emergency, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've seen a number of illustrations to try to put this into plain scheme for again, the laymen who are not familiar with these matters, of the construction of the dam. And I think you were looking at it earlier today as well. I think you commented also. It's a cutaway view of the dam that shows the weir, I believe you described it as being a concrete structure that has an earthen surrounding, and that beneath it, erosion is cutting away up toward the concrete structure. And should the erosion reach that concrete structure and penetrate beneath it, at that point the weir would collapse, and that would result in drainage of the pond. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Yeah, there's the principal spillway has the valves in a bank in a structure at the weir section of the dam, which is a lower elevation, and that at a somewhat higher elevation, the emergency spillway is simply, it's what's called an OG weir. It's kind of a bell-shaped element of concrete, of a large wall. It's 10 or 20 feet high in this particular application, and water runs over that and cascades down the emergency spillway. In the actuation of that, of course, what was found, now this has never been actuated before, what was found was that the rock eroded rapidly back toward the weir, and the threat there is that it would take the weir out and allow the pool to vent through there. That is an exacerbated problem, because if the bedrock is eroding that rapidly downstream of the weir, one can imagine that if the weir was compromised, the bedrock then upon which the weir sits would erode as rapidly as the downstream bedrock has. So if that's the scenario, then we'd end up with a failure that was certainly pretty extreme and pretty rapid and fairly violent, and certainly a significant amount of flooding downstream.
Now, I know that in engineering, and especially in dam engineering, the phrase catastrophic failure is very weighty and is seldom used. But would you describe this as a catastrophic failure?
There are three failure modes that are evolving here. And any one of those three, if it is allowed to continue until it breaches the pool, is a catastrophic failure of a dam. I have seen a few dam failures. I've seen many dams with serious problems. It's very unusual when you have all of the elements that are able to move water downstream compromised. That's very unusual. Generally, if you were using the primary spillway and something happened that it became unusable, you would use the emergency spillway. That's what it's there for. In this situation, we use the emergency spillway, but it's never been used before. So no one knew what to expect, and in fact, what happened was something that I think no one anticipated, and that was that we find that the emergency spillway has some serious issues, and so now we have every methodology for moving significant amounts of water downstream compromised, each one of those potentially causing a failure of the dam. And I want to be careful here, because I've gotten a lot of criticism for talking about, for using the words dam failure. I think it's pertinent, and I think it's reasonable to talk about that. That's what we're all concerned about. I think that not forming the words out of one's lips do not make it more or less probable. And I think it is what everyone's thinking here. And it is certainly what I'm thinking. I am very concerned that the principal or the emergency spillway will erode back to the pool. I believe that if that happens, and both of them are already significantly underway. If that happens, then the pool will be released. And if the pool is released, even in the abutting soils there, the argument's been put forth many times that, well, that's bedrock, so we don't have to worry about it. Well, we do have to worry about it. We allowed water, a very tiny amount of water, to be transported across that weir and downstream, and it eroded the bedrock out rapidly within a few hours. That's absolutely unacceptable. So one could say that the I'm sorry, I go on here, Matthew. I apologize.
It's certainly understandable. I mean, this is your field, and you're definitely passionate about it. And from the articles that you've penned, from the posts that you've penned, that passion breeds through. But what I wanted to kind of redirect back to is the preventable nature of this potential disaster. And we really are talking about a potential disaster. Some of the inundation maps I've seen put Sacramento underwater, with a special sense of historical irony, where a problem that could have been budgetarily solved in the halls of the California State Capitol may result very well in the flooding of said Capitol.
It is absolutely unbelievable the relative relationship between the cost to maintain properly a dam of this size, which creates this much liability. Dams are very safe things, properly maintained. The failure to maintain simple elements of this dam have put at jeopardy a horrible amount. I mean, this dam irrigates crops that feed the United States and part of the world. We're talking about huge, half the size of Delaware is irrigated by the reservoir of Lake Oroville. This water is conducted down as far as Los Angeles. This is a precious commodity, particularly in the state of California, and deserves some respect.
I've actually spent quite a bit of time in California. I'm based out of Phoenix, Arizona, and I used to actually walk along the top of the Gillespie Dam. You might be familiar with the Gillespie Dam that suffered a failure in '93. With around about, I believe, $10 million of damage, and that's just a simple concrete gravity diversion dam on a relatively small river with a relatively small load compared to Oroville, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the largest dam functioning in the United States. Now, I'm taking a look here at the forecast for Oroville, California, and I'm not exaggerating when I say they're calling for heavy rains for the next 7 days. So, does it feel probable that the types of repairs that are necessary to the primary and auxiliary spillways will be possible within that time frame with the rain already falling, Scott?
I believe it to be impossible to do proper repairs to the spillways in the amount of time that we have. The rain event that we see coming, I think, is the greatest liability for this structure, provided that people do that which is prudent and address the situation immediately. So we have a situation here that is literally the description of catastrophic in its nature, could have been prevented for pennies. And already the discussion before we got to the point that we enjoy today was that we were talking about $200 million. $200 million, which, as I said in one of my writings, will be paid by checks written by our children and our children's children. It is a sad state of affairs.
It absolutely is. I can agree with you on that. And I wanted to thank you again for coming on. I know the HoloNet here, we're a very small show, launching on a new network, Lanterns.buzz, and to be able to get someone of your experience and your pedigree to talk to us a little bit about the dangers that Northern California is facing right now, plain and simple, due to what I would describe as governmental negligence. It is really outstanding. So thank you so much for coming on to the show. I've only got a couple minutes left here before I've got to go to a break. But I did want to advise people to check out the articles that are on LinkedIn that you've penned. One is Oroville Dam, A Failure to Communicate, and also Oroville Dam, Our Father's Legacy, where you focus a little bit more on, as you described, stealing money from our children in order to address what could have been done on the cheap by our own generation. And if people want to check out a little bit more about what you do at Watershed Services, where can they do that?
We have a website, watershedservices.net is a email that we can be reached at. We're a small construction company that does pretty much highly technical repairs, mostly on the eastern coast of the United States. And we kind of do one thing at a time. I used to do much more, but I'm an old guy now. And my interests are exactly what we're discussing today. I care deeply about dam safety. I'll tell you, Matthew, I want to say to you, thank you so much for having me on and for exposing this information to the people that listen to you. I really appreciate it. I think it's a very important thing, and I think that the people of this country need to wake up to our collective responsibility for the infrastructure of America.
I agree with you absolutely. Thank you again, Scott, for joining us. That was Scott Cahill with Watershed Services of Ohio, our expert on dam engineering. Thanks again, Scott, and we'll look to have you back if at all possible if there are additional developments here at the Oroville Dam, and I'll look forward to that. Thank you, sir. All right, then we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to get into the rise of 21st century nationalism. We're going to talk about the upcoming elections in France and who Marine Le Pen is and why she should matter to you. And following that, toward the tail end of the hour, we're going to talk about Mr. Felix Kjellberg, also known as PewDiePie, YouTube's #1 creator. All that and more on the other side of our break here. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on Lanterns Radio Network. We'll be back.
You are listening to the Lanterns Radio Network, where Americans come together to illuminate the truth. Turn it up loud and proud until the knob breaks off. Lanterns, illuminating the truth.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Holloway, and I hope you're enjoying our podcast so far. It's been exciting putting this together for you, and I'm looking forward to many more to come. I did want to let you know that in setting up the HoloNet and getting everything launched here, we've gone ahead and set up a page on Patreon.com. Now, if you haven't heard of Patreon, Patreon is a website that's similar to other crowdfunding sources that allows you to support on a month-to-month basis those sources, those artists, and those groups that you really care about and that you're passionate about. And I hope that we can ignite passion in a lot of people to become more involved in the political process, and also to become involved in the conversation and to keep that political dialogue alive. So I'd like to humbly ask you today to consider becoming a patron of the HoloNet on Patreon.com, and you can access that at Patreon.com/theHoloNet. We have various levels of patronage. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month, which unlocks exclusive content for the Patreon community, such as a feed of patron-only content. And then you have a $5 option, which gives you behind-the-scenes access to blog about different inspirations that you have, and give you access to patrons-only polling. And then we have $10 option, which gives you a signed digital poster plus everything else. $20 option, which gives you name and the credits on the site, and all other rewards. And we even have a segment sponsor package available on Patreon, which is $125 a month, which entitles you and your business to a 60-second ad as a segment sponsor during the podcast, of course, subject to content approval. So if you would like to become a patron of the HoloNet, we would be greatly thankful to you, and it's going to go toward a solid cause of generating this sort of millennial constitutional conservative content that is so lacking in our media today. So thank you for your time, for your consideration, and for being a part of the HoloNet. Here we hold the line against the night, and the millennial conservative resistance begins here.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
And welcome back. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Radio Network. I'm Matt Holloway. All right, folks. Now, as promised, we're going to jump into the insanely alarming world of the rise of 21st century nationalism. Now, this is a little project that I've been wanting to bring to you for a long time now, and it took me quite some time to actually put it together, but it centers around a few moving parts, and the moving parts therein are Brexit, the rise of nationalistic parties around Europe, the election of President Donald Trump, and the Tory government in the UK. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of give you some highlights from a story that I put out on Lanterns. If you want to check that out, it's at lanterns.buzz. It's titled The Rise of 21st Century Nationalism. So I go into the story with, it's with mounting concern that many international observers view the April presidential election in France. However, for American conservatives, the seemingly meteoric rise of Madame Marine Le Pen's National Front appears to be a welcome accompaniment to the successful Brexit vote earlier in 2016. The rise of the Tories under PM Theresa May in the UK, and of course, the ascension of President Donald J. Trump's populist brand of republicanism. Now, many point to interference from Moscow when seeking a point of origin for the surge of nationalism that is rising as we approach the third decade of the 21st century. However, I believe the answer lies deeper. And while I do fervently believe that all peoples and nations can be united, a serious question must be asked: do they want to be? With the results of the various 2016 elections, I would say it's quite obvious that the forces of globalism and collectivism are on a collision course with history. What is more, I believe that we Americans are partly to blame. The Obama administration, with its foreign policy punctuated by repeated apologies for American actions throughout our history, set the stage for the United Nations' final veil to be lifted and the body revealed as the paper dragon it has always been. In a Cold War setting, the United Nations was a crucial neutral ground, where the superpowers could negotiate and maneuver without losing face at home. However, in a unipolar world dominated by the American military economic strength, the United States had to be front and center in enforcing UN resolutions and ceasefires. Otherwise, the illusion of UN primacy would fail, and fail it finally did, in the form of the Libyan lead-from-behind debacle, culminating in the Benghazi scandal, and the Syrian Red Line, leading to the present Syrian crisis under President Obama's watch. So if you're looking toward Moscow for the genesis of the increase in nationalism and populism in governments throughout the West, turn your gaze homeward to Washington, D.C. and New York. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. So let's grip the mirror and let's examine that a little bit, okay? The United Nations and its predecessor organization, the League of Nations, was a long-held fever dream. First of one of our less illustrious presidents, President Woodrow Wilson, known racist, originator of the 16th Amendment, which brought you the income tax, enforcer of the Alien and Sedition Acts during World War I. All around, not my favorite guy in the world. President Woodrow Wilson had a dream of global governance. And that dream, after it failed catastrophically in the wake of World War I and into World War II, was replaced with first NATO for a military aspect, and then with the United Nations. Now, the real cause of the United Nations' existence was the polarization of Europe in post-World War II, really the polarization of the world. In one camp, you had the United States, Great Britain, the Allies, NATO. In the other camp, you had the Soviet Union, the Warsaw Pact, and China, Vietnam, North Korea, the like. And it worked. Because the Soviets and their American counterparts here could not be seen to kowtow to what really amounted to their sworn enemy, their blood enemy. But if they did it in the guise of international cooperation for the greater good of all mankind, then suddenly that made it work again. The Soviet Union fell. I could have a whole nother show on how it didn't really fall, and I might, but the Soviet Union fell in 1991. And we lived in a world dominated by really American preeminence. And then along came President Barack Obama, who decided that it was time for America to step back and allow the community of nations to assert themselves throughout the world, not realizing that the might of the United States was the only thing holding the United Nations intact and making it effective. Because without the truncheon of the American military, what is the United Nations but a rubber stamp? They don't have any real economic clout. All of that is with the World Bank and the IMF. Also, American-dominated organs internationally. But that really stripped the UN of any real power that they had. I mean, when's the last time? Do you know who the UN Secretary General is right now? I gotta look it up. Because it is so irrelevant to my life that I don't know. Let's turn to my old friend Google. Let's see who the Secretary General of the United Nations is. I mean, last time I go back, I think it was Ban Ki-moon. I don't know that it still is anymore. And wow, Google's running pretty badly here. So I'm just going to vamp a little bit. Who is Secretary General of the United Nations?
According to UN.org, the 13th of October 2016, the General Assembly today appointed by acclamation the former Prime Minister of Portugal, Antonio Guterres, as the next United Nations Secretary General to succeed Ban Ki-moon when he steps down on the 31st of December.
Oh, okay. So I was close. Ban Ki-moon was the last one. We have a new UN Secretary General who's former Prime Minister of Portugal, Antonio Guterres. But think about it. How completely irrelevant is the UN Secretary General at this point? This isn't Kofi Annan we're talking about. This isn't a great peacemaker. Because the UN doesn't make peace anymore. The UN does a really good job not making peace between anybody. They sign draft resolutions that accomplish nothing. They censure Israel on a constant basis. I'm a huge proponent for getting the United States out of the UN. For two reasons. I've always seen the UN as an affront to American sovereignty. Really, national sovereignty. And I see it as a useless organ. It's an appendix. Now, if you want to hear the rest about the rise of 21st century nationalism, go ahead and check out that story. It's on theholonet.blogspot.com. It's also on lanterns.buzz. But I did tell you we would talk a little bit about who Marine Le Pen is. Now, Marine Le Pen is the head of the National Front Party in France, and she stands a really reasonable shot. They're the far-right party. She stands a reasonable shot at gaining the presidency in France. And she basically is their version of Donald Trump. Marine Le Pen is looking to push back on the internationalism and the globalism and multiculturalism that has been causing France problems. She wants to go back to the franc as the currency and ditch the euro. She wants to leave the European Union. She is a huge proponent of Frexit. So, there's your 5 seconds on Marine Le Pen. Check her out. Again, I think our big problem is that I think this world wants nationalism at this point in time. All right, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Mr. Felix Kjellberg, Mr. PewDiePie, and the troubles he's having. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on Lanterns Radio Network.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
And we're back. Thanks for hanging out and waiting. Wanted to get to our final story of the day here, and this revolves around a YouTube creator by the name of PewDiePie. Now, you might have heard of him. You might not have actually heard his work. But he is incredibly popular. He has 53 million subscribers to his YouTube channel. And I'm going to give you some excerpts here from my story that I put out on it today. And you can decide. Now, for non-YouTubers out there, Lanterns Media's own K.E. Dean covered the uproar on Tuesday when the news dropped. That Disney's Maker Studios and Google YouTube had withdrawn from PewDiePie. Google withdrew him from their Google Premiere, and Disney cut ties with him altogether. But PewDiePie may not be a household name, but for Google's YouTube, he was a rising star. Felix Kjellberg, a Swedish-born vlogger, has made millions with profanity-laced, edgy content geared around video games. Known for outrageous gags, loosely described as performance art, Kjellberg is best known for his attention-seeking stunts, such as threatening to delete his PewDiePie channel once he hit 50 million subscribers, and tweeting fake news about himself. Last August, Twitter went so far as deleting his account after he joked about joining the Islamic terrorist group ISIS. So, known for making some jokes in bad taste. Now, what happened is today he released a video responding to allegations of anti-Semitism stemming from a Wall Street Journal piece posted Tuesday, and he responded with a heartfelt apology, accepting responsibility for his actions, and expressing respect for his audience and his former partners at Maker Studios and YouTube. And of course, he gave a well-earned scathing rebuke to the mainstream media, which characterized him as a Nazi and an anti-Semite. Now, I'm going to play for you a clip of what caused this to come about, the video that he posted, which is no longer available online, that caused him to be branded an anti-Semite. So we'll go to that clip now. Now,
I paid for this. What? What's with the Christmas? I like the editing. Subscribe to Keemstar.
Now, at this moment, on screen, the two young Indian gentlemen are holding up a sign that says, "Death to all Jews." And PewDiePie has his eyes wide in disbelief and has clapped his hand over his mouth, seemingly aghast that they actually carried out his instruction. The captioning, if you turn on the captioning of the video, it actually puts in text, and I warn you against the strong language in the video and in the captioning, that he says, "This is the moment where Pewds realizes he effed up." And I censored that a little bit for you. So it's very evident to me that he realizes the depths of his mistake. We'll go back to that clip now.
Wouldn't play Roblox with me, but these guys wrote, "I'm sorry, I didn't think they would actually do it. I feel partially responsible, but just I didn't think they would actually do it." I mean, I gotta give them 5 stars for an outstanding experience, because at least they did what I asked. Well, that has been Fiverr. What an experience. Wow. I didn't expect that. Let me know if I should do more of these. Leave a like, I guess. I don't feel good. I don't feel too proud of this. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm not anti-Semitic or whatever it's called. Okay, so don't get the wrong idea. It was a funny meme, and I didn't think it would work. Okay, you can't hold me. The Verge, please, stop. Stop. No, I swear, I love Jews. I love them.
Now, I'm going to read you a little note that I wrote to Felix here. It's from an editorial position. "I feel your jokes did go too far. We're tone deaf to history, and we're reprehensible. But you owned up, and I respect you for that. I've been monitoring the developing story closely and have watched the offending videos that are still available online, as well as read numerous accounts of those that aren't. I've also read and watched the media firestorm that is consuming you and your brand. From what I can see, I don't believe you to be an anti-Semite, white supremacist, or a Nazi. Foolish, perhaps. Crude, certainly. But I feel compelled to agree with your stand that your use of Nazi imagery and anti-Semitic language was intended as sarcastic, ironic, and satirical. As was evidenced by your December and January videos, I believe that the WSJ compilation of their proofs of your anti-Semitic content were taken far out of context. No one in the media is defending you, but I'm happy that fans and fellow YouTubers are. There are, unfortunately, actual Nazi pages like the Stormers that are enthusiastically glomming onto you, which you have addressed. Yet you apologized, and you rightfully rebuked the true hate groups. I've not been a fan of yours to date, although I'm a fan of a few similar YouTubers. But someone needs to stick up for you. We must defend free speech, even if it is speech that we find objectionable. You can rest easy today, knowing that you're now in the company of other good people who have been mischaracterized as Nazis, such as Glenn Beck, who donned a German uniform for his Arguing with Idiots book cover. According to Ben Shapiro, who appeared on Fox yesterday on an unrelated topic, it appears that running wild with unsubstantiated stories is en vogue. Shapiro said, "Guys, if you want people to take you seriously, you have to stop setting your hair on fire and running into plate glass windows before you even know what the hell is going on." You and I probably don't agree on much politically or philosophically. This is me talking now. But you never know. And your comedy makes me cringe so hard it hurts. But I announced today that I, Matt Holloway, owner and syndicated blogger of the HoloNet, will lock arms and stand beside you in the defense of free speech. At the HoloNet, we've got your back, Felix. Seriously, though, what were you thinking? As hyper-offended as this world gets, you had to see this coming. And I stand by that note. So, I understand what Felix did. He wanted to prove how ridiculous it is that the website Fiverr enables you to pay $5 to get people around the world to do basically anything. He did a couple of different things. He asked one girl to play a game with him. He asked another girl to generate a mathematical graph that resembled a phallus. And he asked one gentleman who dresses up and pretends to be Jesus to say something unremarkable about another YouTuber. But at the end of the day, the mischaracterizations that were levied at Felix are not fair. I wholly support the right of Disney and Google to step back from their partner when they feel that there's potential for damaging their brand. But pillorying PewDiePie in public, that's not appropriate. It was a joke. It was a bad joke. It was an offensive joke. But we get too easily offended. I'm Matt Holloway. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast. That's it for this week's show. Thank you as always, and God bless.